This is IsAware, powered by Intersoft Associates. IsAware is your connection to exploring the systems and software that power businesses like yours with expert insight, experience, and advice.
Welcome back to IsAware. I'm Chris Bentliff, and I'm joined as ever by Hai Goldstoff and Abe Unger from Intersoft Associates. And guys, something that has come up again and again and again is we were working with somebody and in-house they had somebody who did something, or we were working with somebody and they had outsourced this project to somebody. And when we got it, we really had to do a lot of course correcting or whatever. I'm wondering if today we can have a conversation about getting ahead of that, or maybe being proactive about that. So Hai, kind of my starting question is, how do I know if I have the wrong person, either that I've hired, the wrong, consultancy or agency or company, or even the wrong person on my staff to take command of what I'm trying to do? What are some signals or some flashpoints that I should keep in mind?
Well, you actually got to break that down into three different things.
Great.
One is hiring someone on your staff. Second is, if you outsource it, are you outsourcing it domestically or are you offshoring it? And then again, on offshoring it, where are you doing it? If you're offshoring it, you're kind of going for a commodity engagement. So, but if it's someone that's on your staff, if it's a team, that's great. And if they are professional, software developers, computer science, not just a guy who knows how to use Excel well, or someone who knows how to use or a woman that knows how to use Access well. If it's just one person, one of the problems that you're going to have is managing that person. If you're not technical, you don't know how to manage them. And even outsourcing from management perspective, assuming you don't have a whole technology infrastructure set up, they kind of don't want to know anything. They kind of let him, it's yours, and let him. And they make the mistake of not knowing passwords, not knowing where things are. And it's real important, for them to make sure that that happens. They don't get involved in the nitty gritty, and they should certainly have a good company that works with them, even if it's just on the IT end, to make sure they can help with best practices. I mean, we do that with all of our clients, because we're deeply invested in their success, which is kind of something, to kind of keep track of as we go further down who you deal with. But also, if you have a single person doing this, you have no way, to challenge what you're told. If that person tells you from a technology standpoint the sky is green, you can't debate that. You don't know what's possible. That person might not know what's available, because what he's learned and the problems he's solved may be somewhat myopic. That kind of a business. That business, he's seen their businesses, and he tries to solve them. And which I've told, actually, our largest client is somebody who couldn't afford two programmers. And today they're our biggest client, and they afford a whole consulting firm with a number of people supporting them on a regular basis. But what happens is, if the person's any good, he's going to look for more challenges. You can't give him that. And if he's no good, you really don't want him. So that's the issue with, hiring someone that's on staff, or even just bringing in one person who may be a good programmer, but hasn't seen all aspects of development, hasn't put in his 10,000 hours, so to speak, of various problems and applying what they know to those problems, and looking at commonality. We were in a conversation today with a new client who can't get stuff done quickly enough, and we have to hold them back a little bit. And we know what they're going to need, and we're talking about giving them capabilities that talk about looking for certain data, and we say, well, if you're looking for that, you're going to look for this. We never do that. Costs 5 minutes more code to do that. So we know what they're going to need. We know once they have those capabilities, they're going to use them. Someone who's not done this before isn't going to be able to do that. So that's my take on the individual.
No,
But more importantly, you have no one to challenge them. And we are happy to, get involved with anybody, even on a maintained continuity basis, even if we don't do any real work, we're just on a management area.
As it goes to challenging someone, by the way, you were talking about, individuals and lack of challenge. One of the things people tend to have in coding is it's a good enough attitude. It's good enough to solve the problem. It's good enough to get me through this. It's good enough code. It'll last me till tomorrow. It's good. And that attitude is, as we've said many times before, good enough is not good enough.
But also what happens is the programmer starts acting as an actuary, where he says, this will never happen, until it does.
I think that's a really great point, because the problem that I want to solve today might involve, hey, I think that I need somebody who can really make sense of these spreadsheets, or who can really help me with the problems I'm having with Microsoft Access, to use some things that you just mentioned. And you're saying that might not be the thing you should be doing at all. But if your finite sort of scope of this or perspective is limited to those things, and then you go out and hire somebody with those skill sets, you're going to hit a wall at some point. An innovation wall is going to stop you from moving further.
But using Excel and Access as proof of concepts, or if there's no real volume where it's just not worth anything, it's just not worth doing. Again, we're working with somebody else who is managing tasks. I'm trying to be as vague as I can over here, yet be understandable. He really needs he'll ultimately need a fairly sophisticated system written. But right now, the number of tasks that he deals with at any one point in time doesn't warrant anything. So we're having him use actually a CRM to do most of his data entry. And we're going to go in and hook up to that CRM and run some analyses for him. So we don't need all the granularity that he might need if he had 10,000 tasks going on at the same time. He might have a number of tasks that'll fit on a page. So he doesn't need anything, but at least it provides a fact. Sometimes getting something done electronically, where everything's in one place, is not a bad idea as a proof of concept. And this is what this is. This happens to be a bank, and that's what that is with that particular bank. So it's as you start growing, and as the number of transactions start going, getting larger and larger and larger, that's when the system, hits the wall. And as you see that happening, you should at least plan for what you might need in the future.
Abe, I love a couple things that Hai said. One is that the programmer becomes an actuary. That's really an important concept. And two is, if you're the business leader who's not a technologist, you're sort of trusting this person to kind of lead you in the right direction. From where you sit, when you get involved in all these projects, are there some common characteristics or sort of red flags that you look for where you say, where did this come from? Oh, well, our tech guy said that was the thing to do. Is it an over opinionation? Is it a lack of collaboration with others? What are some things that I should be kind of thinking about or looking for internally if I'm struggling with some of this stuff?
So that's actually part of it. When I'm looking at some of these things, you may see some bad habits that people have picked up in terms of programming from the code aspect of something. And you're looking at some of these and you're thinking, these are horrible things. Why would you ever code that way? And because if you're the one guy who's been doing this and been doing this for years, and you haven't had anyone else review that, you haven't had anyone to challenge you. So you said the manager is not technical. They're not going to be reading code. They're not going to be challenging you. That tech guy is going ahead doing something. It's bad practice, bad form. But it works. So they keep doing it again and again and again. That's the house of cards. You pull out one at the bottom, the whole thing collapses. So the base, the foundation is not good. And because the person doesn't know any better or have someone to challenge that, you find that. And many times we find that in software where we're asked to take over a project or to help with a project. We were once called in years ago for a process that was running. It was a daily process. Processing and shipping and receiving information from UPS, FedEx, and it was a process that could not finish in a day. So by the time the next day came along, the next file came through, that first file wasn't finished processing. And they couldn't track packages that were going out and packages that were shipped because they couldn't process data fast enough. And we used a resource who was trained, relatively new, wasn't an intern level, but close enough, a junior, who we had trained with and we had worked with, who looked at the process, and as a junior looked at this process and said, this doesn't really make any sense. Why would anyone do this? And with a little bit of fiddling with some of their code, he said, no, this doesn't make any sense. Let me just write you a new query. Wrote him a new query. 20 minutes later, the day's file was processed. So something that took over a day to process data, he was able to do really, really quickly because he had the foundation. We had worked with him. We had a team behind him. So in learning these things, we trained him in how do you analyze something? How do you figure something out? As a manager, you're not necessarily going to see that piece of code, but you're going to know enough to question, should it really take that long to process data? And that's what you'll ask the programmer, and that's where, he can tell you yes or no, but as a manager, you'll know whether that doesn't add up.
How important are fresh eyes on something? Because part of what you just described was maybe somebody coming in who, hasn't been there for the whole thing and is seeing some things that others can't see because, as Hai says, they're not so myopic. Is it important to have some fresh perspective?
Always. Even as any programmer, we always have some of our other programmers go in and help with some of the testing and review. For that reason, you tend to develop things a certain way, you end up testing that same way. And by having someone else look at it, it's like, let me try this or let me try that. Now that it's broken, okay, great. Now I have someone else who can help me fix it.
Well, that pushback, as you're talking about, Hai, that challenging. Well, why did you do this? Oh, good point. Or, well, here's why. Oh, okay, that makes good sense.
And it's also important from a management employee perspective is not to make it, negative. It's always a positive thing. Why'd you do it? We're trying to learn, we're trying to learn, we're trying to make better for the client and make you, and for you to learn more. It's all done from a mentoring standpoint. So never challenge them in a negative fashion. You talk about fresh eyes. There have been a number of times where we just had an issue that we could not solve, and it was a critical issue. And people, Abe and some other staff and me, I was just looking at it. And finally, I realized everybody go home, come back the next morning, and the same eyes, but they're fresh, solve the problem like that.
What a testament to the value of experience, even that you had the wherewithal to say, you know what, we're too close. We got to step back. Maybe we can come back with this after we get a good night's sleep. That is so valuable. And for me, it connects a little bit high. A lot of when we talk about technology, we talk real tactical. And part of what you've shared again and again is the business impact of the decisions that can get made, which is, for me, a strategic component. Is it important for business leaders to look at their technology more as a strategic asset and less as a tactical to-do to kind of get done, and therefore to connect with people who can have those sorts of conversations?
Well, the strategic defines the tactical to some degree, but it's got to be done strategically. You need both, but ultimately, how will the software help you differentiate from your customers? And how will it improve the customer experience as well? That's real important. However that may be, if it's nothing more than the way the customer service people interact with you. How do you improve that customer experience? Who would you rather call? Not that you want to call any of them, but Verizon or Cricket if you have a problem with your phone. Mm. So
it's important to have that. I mean, we've talked before about how you guys have been around since the DOS days. I mean, there just aren't very many things you haven't.
Don't remind me.
There aren't very many things you haven't seen or experienced. And that comes out not just in the capabilities you have, but as you said, Hai, just in how you see problems or in how you approach a thing or in the questions that you ask. I think that's good perspective.
One thing that's really important, you talk about outside firms, just to spend a little time on that. So the offshore folks are certainly less invested. And because they're commodity, the thing that Abe said before, they know how to do things one way. for the most part, I call them shake and bake programmers. You put them in a bag, put them in the oven. They only do things one way. And the example Abe was mentioning was they knew how to do things one way. It worked, but it didn't work in context for the size of what needed to be done. And we had a relatively junior individual. It wasn't rocket science. It wasn't terribly easy, but it wasn't crazy. And now every day it processes in 45 minutes to an hour. And there are a whole bunch of good firms. You just have to make sure that they have a good track record and understand processes like yours. We've taken over systems from good firms. They were, real firms, had real people, real talent, but they couldn't operate in an environment that some clients may have needed.
And I think if we're being transparent, do I not often go offshore because it saves me some money?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Why not? Hi.
Two reasons. Number one is it will take them much longer to do things. It will be done it will be done over and over again. They're not done. Two reasons, and I'm going to number three now. Things aren't properly documented. If you have a piece of software, it's got to be written properly. The average shelf life of a piece of software is going to be minimum of 5 to 7 years. Some may be longer. We've seen those that were 20 years old. So it's got a long shelf life. If it's not written properly and not documented properly, the life cycle cost of maintaining that software, that is changing it, dealing with problems, becomes a lot more difficult to read through code that looks like your spine and all the nerves in your spine, as opposed to looking at a very straight line as you might have in one of your bones. So the code is written poorly. It's hard to make sure that you're not playing in a Jenga game where something that you change that you don't know about because you're there 2 years later perhaps. So anyway, so things take longer to do. They're not as good because again, they don't care. They just want to get it out and get it built. And over the life cycle cost of that piece of software, it will cost you a lot more in hard dollars and in soft dollars and lost productivity and everything else. That's the short answer on why they're not cheaper.
Guys, it's a great conversation today about, and I the title of this one, Abe, is Good Enough is Not Good Enough. And you've really helped us, I think, to understand why we make some of the decisions we make and how they can come back to bite us if we don't think more thoroughly. And we'd be remiss if we didn't say, look, just give us a call. We're happy to talk through what's going on with you. We clearly have the perspective that can be useful. If we're there to contribute, we will. If we can't contribute, but we can see some problems, we'll have that conversation too. But
at a minimum, we'll make you think.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll challenge, right? In the right ways. Thanks, guys. Great conversation. Looking forward to next time.
Thanks for joining us for IsAware, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. IsAware is powered by Intersoft Associates, who believes the more you know about your IT, the better. Visit us at intersoftassociates.com and schedule your free consultation to talk about how custom software can help your business.